Hello, I'm Darby. Welcome to my channel. Today, I want to talk about being an aspirational classics girly. There's something about the aesthetic, there's something about the vibe. I've always wanted to be an elegant person with an impeccable sweater collection who looks good in designer glasses, someone who owns designer glasses, someone who not only has the attention span to make it through a brick like War and Peace, but also the intellectual sophistication to appreciate it on a super deep level. But I'm not that person. Old books, man, they're tough. The sentences are old and weird, and the themes at the point of the books always feel a little too subtle and a little too obscure for a dummy like me to comprehend. So if you're like me, if you are actually a silly little goose, a goofy little guy, an unserious person that would like to read serious things, may I recommend A Swim in a Pond in the Rain by George Saunders. It is now one of my favorite books. I recommend it all the time. It is difficult to describe this book, and its strange title isn't doing it any favors. If you read the blurb on the back, you will find out that it is a condensed version of the short story writing class that George Saunders teaches at Syracuse University for his graduate students, which might make you think that it's going to read like a textbook, be super boring, and it absolutely is not. He has a super playful tone that's amusing to read, and the first time I read through this, I read it like a novel. I didn't stop to do any of the exercises, and I think it's a fine way to enjoy this book. It's also a Russian literature appreciation class, because the way George Saunders teaches writers to write is by teaching them to read. He has selected 7 short stories from the Russian masters like Tolstoy, Gogol, some other guys, and he guides you through them with really precise, effective explanations and a sense of humor. I'll probably never love Russian literature, but after reading this book, I feel like I have an informed perspective about it, and I can respect it in a way that I couldn't before. This book is marketed for writers, but I think readers will get a valuable education out of it. I certainly did. And I really recommend that you pick up a copy and work through it yourself, but maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just want the good stuff right now. So for the rest of the video, I want to go through the reading advice that I learned when I read this book about 2 years ago, and share the ones that I still use on basically every book that I read now. Let's get into it. The first piece of advice that George Saunders gives is go slow. Take it one page at a time. And that might sound a little idiotic because that is literally how you read any book. But he asks you to read a page and then do 3 things. 1. Summarize what you know so far. 2. Ask yourself, what are you curious about? And then finally 3. Ask yourself, where do you think this story is headed? This can be tedious, and if I'm reading a novel, I'm not doing it for every page, for like 200 pages. But I will do this exercise for like the first 15 or 20 pages of a book. Then after that, I might do it after I finish a chapter or a section, or just periodically to get a temperature check of how well I understand what's happening. In A Swim in a Pond, George Saunders does ask you to write these things down, but I will only do this if I'm reading a book for a book club or a discussion group. Next, he gives some advice on how to make better summaries. When you summarize something, challenge yourself to do the Hollywood version of it. Well, the Hollywood version of a summary is always something that is like short, simple, and very marketable. It may feel silly and crass to reduce a great novel down to something like Boy Meets Girl, but it is actually extremely helpful and very fun. The Hollywood version of A Christmas Carol could look like mean guy meets ghosts who scare him into being a nice guy. The Great Gatsby could be something like a new money guy tries to win the heart of an old money lady. It's silly, it's fun, and it's actually really, really helpful. I find that if I'm reading something that's dense, difficult, or has like a non-linear, non-traditional story structure, this advice will help me test my comprehension and kind of understand where I'm at in the story. Some things are easy to summarize, some things are a little harder. Like, how do you summarize The Lord of the Rings? There's so much stuff going on. There are like lots of valid ways to describe what happens in the books. Nephew receives wacky heirloom from eccentric uncle. Handsome lost prince reclaims kingdom. And so those things are true, but they're not really what the story's about. But don't worry, he gives some advice on knowing what to focus on when you're summarizing the book. You can try finding the heart of the story. Saunders has this theory that every story is like a ceremony. And every ceremony has a heart. So lots of things can happen during a wedding ceremony. There's a bridal procession, there are ring bearers, there are flower girls, but we intuitively know that the heart of the ceremony is the exchanging of vows. It's that super special moment of transformation where the couple is changed forever. So yes, Lord of the Rings, it's about a lot of stuff, but the heart of the story is about a humble hobbit going on an epic adventure to destroy a cursed ring. Another piece of reading advice that I use all of the time is I ask myself, is it a story yet? George Saunders believes that some things are stories and some things are merely entertaining descriptions of events. This may feel controversial if you are like me and you are poisoned by postmodernity and you believe anything can be a story, but Saunders tries to prove his point by asking you to take a book that you know already and cut it short just before the actual ending. Try ending Pride and Prejudice after the first chapter. Now try ending it after her weird cousin shows up. Now end it after Elizabeth and Darcy's first big fight. At what point does the book feel like a story and not simply a collection of events that happened to Elizabeth Bennet during one random year of her life? And then finally, another piece of reading advice that I use all of the time is I ask myself, why this day? George Saunders points out that we don't read about Ebenezer Scrooge's week before the ghosts show up. We don't start Star Wars A New Hope when Luke Skywalker is 8 years old, and that's because some days are more important than others. If we ask ourselves what's special about this moment in time, it can help us see the people, places, and events that change characters and advance the plot. Saunders has so much more advice that he delivers with much more skill, much more nuance, way more effectively than I ever could in the video. And so while I think everyone should read the entire thing, I think you can get 90% of the value in the first 10% of the book. Take what you need, leave what you don't. I also think that people who are struggling with their creative practice will really love George Saunders' essays on the creative process. So that's it for this week. If you made it this far, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.